All right, Stochastic, here we go. It's your old pal EMac coming to you with Greg Ehrenberg as we get ready for the penultimate, the second to the last Sunday night football live before lock. We have the NFC Conference Championship. Right now, the AFC Conference Championship is taking place. Kansas City Chiefs are ahead 17-7. They just started the fourth quarter there in Baltimore, and Kansas City has the ball driving at the Kansas City 40. Nothing exciting really from this game yet. I think a lot of people went away from this one, Greg, and have backloaded their lineups. So we're going to have double discussion here for anybody doing the late swap for their two-game slate. And then, of course, we've got the Lions taking on the San Francisco 49ers in what should be a good game. High total and no weather this weekend. It's, remember, late afternoon in San Francisco right now, so it's around 70 degrees there. So good times. Good times. Anything surprising to you in this early game other than how low-ish the offenses have been thus far?
So at least, let me see, because I don't know if anything has changed since we've started this, but there's two players who look like they're absolutely necessary to have in your lineups, and they are currently Travis Kelce as well as Isaiah Pacheco. Other than that, I don't think anybody's super. Oh, I know Zay Flowers. Sorry. So Zay Flowers, to win a big contest for the main slate, you need to have Zay Flowers, Travis Kelce, and Isaiah Pacheco right now. Everything else is kind of up in the air, though.
Yep, that's kind of what it looks like. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let me see. They're not going to push the start of the second game because if the first game goes long, will they?
Well, the games haven't been starting on time anyway. It kind of NBA-esque. The playoff football games have been starting on time. It's not going to impact the contests on DraftKings or FanDuel, but yeah, I don't expect the game to start on time.
All right, but you are correct. Everything does lock at 6:30. That is 58 minutes from now. So we'll talk about all things NFL. We, of course, are sponsored by Owner's Box. If you sign up through the link in the YouTube description below us here, you will get up to a $500 deposit match. They, of course, have more than just football. They have basketball. They will have baseball. It is your one-stop shop for unique unique lineup construction there because they have a Superflex position. So that makes it fun for the NFL, although this was the last slate to try that out. But they've got some interesting wrinkles coming up here for baseball as well. All righty, Greg. Let's see here. Nothing dramatic other than we don't know exactly how injured Deebo Samuels may or may not be. He hurt his shoulder in the last game, only played in the first quarter. Now the 49ers barely won that one, but he got hurt in week 6 in that game in Cleveland in the first quarter as well. The Niners lost that one and then 2 more after that. So he apparently is a key part of the offense and helping the teams move. An embarrassment of riches across that team. Though he was not in the Pro Bowl, you've got Brandon Ayuk as the second team All-Pro wide receiver. You have Kittle had Pro Bowl honors. You had Kyle Juszczyk make the Pro Bowl as well. 4 players on defense. It's rather a star-studded team there. And then, but the question with Deebo remains on the other side. No real issues from Detroit other than they're missing one of their starting guards. Their center was really banged up. He had like toe, ankle, back, rib, leg, ear, just name a body part, and that he was listed with it on the injury report. He will be playing tonight. His effectiveness, well, we'll have to see. But aside from that, nothing too crazy. So no dramatic injuries and no major weather. So a little bit of a change from what we've seen the prior 2 weekends here for the postseason, Greg.
Yeah, so no real changes from that standpoint. Also, if anybody's watching and you're in our Discord channel, add us over the course of the show. Here we'll be answering some of those questions as we go, as well as your guys' super chats, of course. But yeah, I do wonder, EMac, is there anything that you are looking at from the first game on the slate also that is making you potentially think about changing your lineups for the later games? And obviously we still got another quarter left to go. And there could also be the situation where we don't know the result of the first game and the second game locks. But it always is something that I like to keep in mind when you're playing some of these shorter slates that people don't always think about. Well, actually, really any slate for that matter is if a lineup appears dead, there are oftentimes you can make swaps to revitalize certain lineups. There are ways you could utilize late swap to slightly increase your ROI over the long stretch of time. But is there anything that stands out to you like that for today, or just not enough information?
No, I think I'll pretty much be letting it ride. The real decision point for me is how much Christian McCaffrey, and I have, like I'm sure most of the field, an ungodly amount on that on the 2-game slate. He's, of course, going to be your primary multiplier option tonight as well. You're paying for it, but he has delivered more often than not, which is just absolutely wild. He led the league with 21 touchdowns. He scores pretty much every game. A lot of times, multiple touchdowns. What more can you say about him? Last week, he did get 14, either 12 or 14 targets. He caught 7 of them. That was probably a function of Deebo Samuel being out. I don't expect it to be quite that high tonight. But 2 games ago, in the last meaningful regular season game, he still had 10 targets. So he's going to be active no matter what. Detroit has a really good front four when it comes to defending the rush, but they are susceptible in the secondary. San Francisco, of course, is they're one of their main focuses is getting the run game going. But they have a very, very smart coach who is, if that's not working, he's definitely going to go to the pass. And we've seen Brock Purdy more than just a caretaker. Greg, Mr. Irrelevant is already playing in his 2nd NFC Championship game. This will be his 5th playoff game. Pretty good. And he almost fell a little bit short of winning an MVP this year, or at least being one of the 3 finalists. Pretty cool.
Isn't he a finalist?
I didn't know how it works. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. It should be Lamar, though.
Yeah, so Lamar Jackson won, but I'm pretty sure that one of the finalists is, so if I remember correctly, the finalists are Josh Allen, Brock Purdy, Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, and Tua. I think those are the finalists.
I didn't realize. Is this this isn't like the Heisman, right? It's just they're going to announce whoever wins. They just are making it a little more I don't know what the right word is, pressure or anticipation for it.
So there is a change in how they do the MVP voting. It used to be where it was just one vote, and it's just if you're a voter, it's just here's your vote for MVP. But now there's down ballot votes too, kind of like they do in other sports, where it's like you submit your 1st place vote, 2nd place vote, 3rd place vote. So I'm fairly sure you vote 5 players on each ballot, and then they do like a final 5.
Okay. That's actually kind of cool. I like when things like that happen, because then you can sort of see, like they do with in MLB, who got the X number of votes or who was close. It's kind of interesting. So, okay, that's pretty cool. All righty. What would you like to hit on here? You want to go kind of by position, quarterbacks first?
And we could also start here just by looking at, I ran Sims for both FanDuel and DraftKings, so we could go ahead. I've got it shared here on screen. So right here, starting with FanDuel, we could look at the overall top projected lineup by simulated ROI for both sites. I see Malcolm Revamp in chat. That is something that he frequently leaves us super chats about. He wants to see the Sims on screen. And I know also for other people, something that is interested to see based on the data and everything we have at Stochastic.com. And by the way, if you guys want to sign up for any of our Sims packages, we got links for that below. But let's go ahead and see what it is that's projecting well here. Starting with FanDuel, this is the number 1 overall projected lineup that I have in here by simulated ROI, and it is Christian McCaffrey in the MVP spot, with the Lions defense actually also being in it, and then Jared Goff, George Kittle, and Jake Moody rounding it out. That is the top FanDuel lineup that I have in here. And then over on DraftKings, the top lineup I have actually is Jake Moody in the MVP. This is the first time I could ever remember having a top lineup all year that's actually had a kicker in the captain spot. But Jake Moody in the captain spot, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, and Jameson Williams. So actually, this lineup does make a little bit of sense to me, EMac, because it doesn't have either of the quarterbacks. So it has a bunch of skill position players and actually does have a kicker in the captain spot, which if I was hand building lineups, not something I would typically do, but I'm not smarter than what our data is. So you could kind of tell a story from this, which is, all right, well, what happens if the teams don't score touchdowns and instead it's just some PPR points by the pass catchers, and then you get the kickers doing some of the scoring here. So Jake Moody being in the captain spot. I understand like the narrative of this lineup, how it comes together. But those are the top projected lineups that I have on FanDuel and DraftKings. And overall, lineups are skewing a little bit more towards at least my top ones, the 49ers side than the Lions side, for people who are interested in that.
All right. So you're talking kickers here. Let's go down to the kicker notes. So that would be a rookie kicker in Jake Moody. So he led the league with both 60 point after touchdowns made and 61 attempted. However, he tried only 25 field goals. Now that makes sense because this was a high scoring offense, so he didn't get as many opportunities. He was, I think, 21 of 24 on those, so around league average. He only had 3 attempts from beyond 50 yards. He did make 2 of them, and then he had a miss between 40 and 49 and one between 30 and 39. So he was interesting. The other side, we have the money badger, Michael Badgley, who actually was on the practice squad for most of the season until the Detroit Lions cut Riley Patterson. The Money Badger is on this is his 5th team in 6 years. He has played in just 64 regular season games for his time. So he's kind of average at best. But again, no weather, which is something that we had to worry about the last 2 weekends. So again, 7 to 10 mile an hour breeze in San Francisco, no precipitation. It's going to be getting into the mid 60s by halftime. So.
Yeah, and if you go ahead and look, I just showed some of the lineups here and some of the DraftKings exposure. I'm getting to a ton of the kickers, not as much. Badgley, he is in 21% of my lineup, so still somebody who I'm overweight to. But then Moody is showing up as just by a mile the value option I'm getting the most of here on DraftKings. I'm curious to see if that's the same on the FanDuel side of things as well. I know we don't typically start by talking about the kickers, but I also don't typically end up seeing a kicker being in the majority of my lineups, which is the case here. I mean, Jake Moody is in north of 80% of my lineups on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And then Badgley here is in 23% of my lineups over on FanDuel. We've got him projected for over 11 points, Moody, which is, I think, also the highest projection I've seen on any kicker all season. So kicker slate to end the year. What could be more exciting than that, EMac?
It's a function of the salary, so there's really not that many cheap players here, and that is a bit of a challenge because the side sort of got ahead of Debo potentially being out. We've seen Jawan Jennings with a slightly elevated salary. You had Ray McLeod, who during the regular season would have been under $1,000 on DraftKings. He's $1,800. He missed weeks 13 through 17. But he returned in week 18. He's going to be their main kick returner. But let's not forget, he did play 24 snaps last week. Part of that was because Debo was out. But even in the beginning of the year, when everybody was healthy, he was working in with Jawan Jennings as kind of the 3rd or 4th receiver. He did step up in that first go-round when Debo was injured. So he is someone that I think is interesting. And if we remember back to his Pittsburgh days, he would almost always get a schemed play or two for him every game because he's just a dynamic playmaker. Yeah, he's a few years older and he's on a team filled with dynamic playmakers. But these are the things we're trying to find as we try to find some of these cheap guys here. Does it make sense? If we dip down to like Charlie Warner, who is a tight end for the 49ers, he had a catch last week. 95 targets went to the tight ends this season for San Francisco, and Kittle had 90 of them. 3 of them went to Ross Dwelley, who was injured midway through the season. So it's been a little sparse there for cheap tight ends as well. And then on the other side, our other cheapie is going to be Anthony Ferkser. So there were some people talking about him in our chat earlier today in the Discord, just wondering, is he somebody that's worthwhile? Because he, like Warner, is $200 on DraftKings. So the interesting thing about him is that by attrition, he is kind of the last backup tight end there. Of course, there's Sam Laporta, but you have Brock Wright, and then I forget the name of the other guy, Mitchell. They're both on IR, so he's kind of the last guy in there.
Yeah, that's why they signed Zach Ertz as well. So Ertz is going to play today, but they did.
Yeah, Ertz isn't going to play. Yeah, he was on the practice squad. He did his best to get ready for the game, and ultimately they decided not to activate him. There's probably a good chance they will if they make it to the Super Bowl. But for now, they decided not to go that route, which to me means all right, Anthony Ferkser's okay for his career. I think he has like 140 targets, 120 catches, 1,000 yards, like 7 or 8 touchdowns. That was over 5 seasons. Last year, he was with Atlanta. His first 4 years of his career, he was with Tennessee. So we remember him from that. Perfectly capable guy. Wasn't drafted, came out of Harvard as a free agent. But I did a little digging. I thought he was one of our better value plays, Greg. And I had not realized. I somehow lost that note that he was from Harvard, because you know how the announcers love to hammer those.
So there's a couple reasons that there's a lack of value on this slate, and most notably, it's that this is the NFC Championship game, and when you get to the championship game, most of the players who matter end up playing, right? We don't get players who sit out, so there's a real lack of value. It's very hard to find cheap guys to get to in showdown contests. That's why Jake Moody is showing up in so many of my lineups. I've got my flex exposure sorted here on screen. And both DraftKings and FanDuel, north of 70% of my lineups, do have Jake Moody here in the flex spot. And then if you look at some of the cheap guys that you had brought up, like Charlie Warner, well, we have him project for 0.47 fantasy points, EMac. We've got Chris Conley project for 0.84. We've got Anthony Ferkser projected for 0.2 fantasy points. So these guys are showing up in a couple of lineups here or there. But if you're somebody who only plays a lineup or two, no, I'm not considering Anthony Ferkser or Chris Conley or Charlie Warner. And that's where you kind of end up getting yourselves to the kickers in this game to save salary. Something else as well is that Deebo Samuel earlier in the week, it was kind of questionable whether he was going to end up playing or not. And there are some backup wide receivers who might have normally been guys like Juwan Jennings, probably would have been considerably cheaper if there wasn't a scenario where Deebo Samuel was on the injury report. Because we've seen both DraftKings and FanDuel for football and basketball, they've been more aggressive in terms of pricing up backups when players are on the injury report. So with Deebo Samuel playing, the pricing got very, very tight for this game.
Yeah, it's we're all playing with the same parameters, which makes it fun. But to your point, this is making some challenging decisions in a way that we don't normally see for all those reasons. So it's rather interesting. But it's these new wrinkles, it's these little puzzles, it's the game within the game that make things so exciting here for DFS. And if you don't have the Sims, do we have a deal for you. We have the all access Sims package. You get NFL, NBA, MMA, PGA, and of course MLB is coming right around the corner before we know it. You have everything together. Now it's $550 a month, but if you show proof that you're using the Stochastic avatar on your DFS sites of choice, we're going to take $150 off that.
Forever.
We're paying you forever. That's in perpetuity. So Greg, this is Greg's little brainchild here, but this is a way to reciprocate with everybody. So it's a pretty good offer here. Definitely want to check that out. Anything you want to add to the Sims here as we meander towards kickoff of the last game before the Super Bowl?
Yeah, understand why people wouldn't want to sign up for a month-long NFL membership with a week left in the NFL. Or, well, technically 2 weeks left, but 2 slates left in the NFL season. But we do have the bundle package. So now if you sign up, you do get access to everything. You could still sign up for individual sports if you want, but if you want to sign up for the bundle, it is the best value. So you could sign up and get NFL, MLB, NBA, PGA, MMA, all in one package. NASCAR is also coming soon with the Daytona 500 coming up. So yeah, if you guys want to sign up and get access to all of our Sims packages, it's now one bundle. And like EMac said, if you use the Stochastic avatar, you also get $150 per month off of it.
So not too shabby there. Not too shabby at all. Speaking of shabby, wow, this NBA slate's going to be a raucous one tonight here. Interesting.
Don't get distracted, EMac, but make sure you get your lineups in. So my lineups
I'm about to upload them.
But EMac's running some issues today. So yesterday, EMac and I did the NBA show together. He missed the Joel Embiid news, which a lot of people missed the Joel Embiid news. He only got ruled out a couple minutes before the game, but EMac's better than that. He's a veteran of the game. So you think, all right, our old pal learned his lesson. Surely that'll never happen to him again. No. He fucked up again today. He sets his lineups. He goes and takes a shower, and then players get ruled out leading up to lock as if he's never played an NBA DFS slate before.
It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. But you know what? I've got the Sims here, and they will take me to the promised land, and that's all we can ask for, Greg. That's all.
Yeah, as long as you build your lineups after all the news comes out, EMac, and not build it before and then think, hey, it's NBA. Surely nobody's going to get ruled out again.
on a Sunday, no less. That just rookie mistakes here. How are you? So top of the order, we obviously know is Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. But did you know just how dominant Amon-Ra St. Brown was? He had almost half of all the receiver targets for Detroit, which is just absolutely wild when you think about it. But he had something like 190 targets, and the position had like 384. Like he was literally within a handful of targets of having half. That's dominance. You have Sam Laporta, who had 120 targets. This is kind of a two-man show. The two-man show in the backfield creates challenges on this team as well. But that gives Jared Goff some amazing skill position players that he can work with here, and a good defensive line. And this is clearly a spot where Goff and company, they're not just happy to be here. They're going to come out swinging, and they really want to win. This isn't a oh wow, this is great. They've got enough veterans in the right places here and good leadership. I think they could come out and pop San Francisco and make this one a close one. But yeah, similar to the 49ers, there's so many moving parts here. You can't just pinpoint one, can you?
So the Lions, this is the old Conor McGregor quote, not here to take part, I'm here to take over. That's the Detroit Lions. They're not just happy to be here, EMac. They're trying to win everything. And yeah, I mean, all year we've seen this be a team that's pretty consistently overachieved, starting with week 1 when they beat the Baltimore Ravens. But you kind of brought up a handful of questions there, EMac, and I want to start with the first thing you brought up, which is Christian McCaffrey. And this is where I view McCaffrey being very different on FanDuel and DraftKings. He's going to be massively popular today. DraftKings is much easier to get to than he is on FanDuel. FanDuel, where we don't have players that are priced at like $200 or $800 to get to, I find it very hard to find the salary space to allow me to comfortably pay up for Christian McCaffrey. So at least as far as FanDuel is concerned, I have McCaffrey in 34% of my top lineups, whereas he's projected for 50% ownership. So taking an underweight stand on McCaffrey, and it's not because he doesn't project well. We even project for 22.26 fantasy points, by far the most of any player in the game. The problem is just how do you comfortably get to him on FanDuel? I don't think you can. I don't think there's a way you could just be like, hey, Christian McCaffrey, easy to get him in with some punt. There just aren't that many cheap guys that I like outside of the kickers in this game. So as far as FanDuel is concerned, I am underweight to Christian McCaffrey. DraftKings with some of the punt options makes it easier to get to him. But FanDuel, DraftKings, wildly different when it comes to Christian McCaffrey.
Would you consider the alternate to be like an Amon-Ra St. Brown with the sheer volume in the passing game that he should be getting? Is that enough of a discount on FanDuel to get to him as a semi-replacement? Or do you move to the quarterbacks at that point?
Yeah, so if I go, and I've got the DraftKings lineups up on screen here, and DraftKings getting to Christian McCaffrey, getting to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but let's go back over to the FanDuel lineups now and see what my exposures are looking like there, and in particular, some of the captains. So let's sort by captains. I know that's something that a lot of people like to ask us about. So it's funny, McCaffrey still ends up being my highest overall rostered captain here, EMac. I have him in 19% of lineups. That's less than half of what the field has. So it's still a fairly underweight stand to Christian McCaffrey. And Malcolm Revamp in the chat is asking, should he fade McCaffrey? If you're playing a bunch of lineups, don't fade him. But if you're only playing one lineup, I don't have an issue with Christian McCaffrey being in that lineup. If you're playing 20 lineups, yeah, you should have McCaffrey in some of them. Although for FanDuel purposes, I do like being underweight to him. Instead, I'm getting just a mix of other guys in the captain spot. So I've got George Kittle showing up in lineups, EMac. Amon-Ra St. Brown more even with the field, but I like some of these really low-owned guys in the MVP spot on FanDuel. George Kittle, 3% owned. We've seen him have games where he's gone for multiple touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk only projected for 6% ownership. I think he's a reasonable play in the MVP spot. I think there's really, really good ways to differentiate your FanDuel lineups.
I would agree with that. It's going to be a little bit painful, but it is just the leverage swings in situations like this. We want to harken back to like the NBA finals on FanDuel even though they add another multiplier player. It's one of those where without that salary multiplier, you really have to consider where the rest of the field is going and range of outcomes, because the leverage and the math problem on that is entirely different than DraftKings, where they have that factored in with another multiplier on the salary on the multiplier position for the captain there.
Yeah, and we did get what happened?
I said, "Oh, crazy! This is one last game. I'm feeling a little verklempt. This is it."
Are you uploading your NBA lineups right now, EMac?
They're already uploaded. I'm good.
Okay, good.
And I already have I'm just going to push a few buttons here on and get my NHL lineups in, because I've already done my parameters and everything. I'm organized today, Greg. After that shower, I decided to rededicate myself to DFS after screwing up.
Nice. There you go. There you go. It's always good. You come up with thoughts in the shower. The water hits your back. You pretend it's the audience applauding you. You got everything figured out there. So we did get a question in Discord channel. This was from Father of Three. He asked us for a single entry contest. What are our thoughts on captain and then low owned options to get to as well? He's asking for DK. So let me go back to our DraftKings lineups, and we could go and look at some of the captains that we have on DraftKings, as well as the lower owned or value options. By far, just to rehash what we'd said before, Moody is by a mile my favorite captain option on the game. And then as far as the captains, right? So my favorite overall value option is going to be Jake Moody. As far as a low-owned captain for single entry, I think that George Kittle, both FanDuel and DraftKings, is the guy who I like going to relative to ownership. Only 3% ownership in the MVP spot on FanDuel, 11% or 11.7% in the captain spot on DraftKings. That's my favorite low-owned guy to get to in the multiplier spot. How about for yourself, EMac?
So it's looking like I'm going to make I can't believe I'm doing this. I am going to be making a stand with Anthony Ferkser. It's allowing me to get to some different builds here, Greg. I am assuming that is a 0 in that lineup, in that spot. I'm okay with that, though. My guess is he's going to get a target, maybe 2. He doesn't have any on the season, but again, he is kind of the last man standing, and we know what we're getting with him. So that is enabling me to kind of hit the 15% cap that I have as I've made my first 100 lineups here. So I've got McCaffrey, Purdy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Brandon Ayuk all coming in at 15%. The player I think is interesting is going to be Laporta, and he is someone that nobody is going underutilized here, but he could be a 2-touchdown guy, and his name is not McCaffrey and not Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think that's sort of where when you're looking at him, he had an amazing game last week, and a lot of targets. I think our projection was around 35 or 36 pass attempts for Jared Goff. That's a fair amount of volume there, and we sort of demonstrated by saying, that Amon-Ra St. Brown and Porter have close to 70% of the targets for the team this season between the two of them. There's some massive target shares there. If something's not going right for Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think Laporta's the next man up. And he works a different part of the field. Even if Amon-Ra is drawing a lot of coverage and they just decide that they're going to blanket him, Amon-Ra works all 3 levels of the route tree. He can run every route there beautifully that there is. So all of a sudden, he takes the attention away, and Goff, he's going to be looking to Laporta. So I kind of like Laporta as the single entry captain.
Hey, I'm overweight to Sam Laporta, both in the flex spot and the captain spot, and he's looked healthy in the playoffs, or at least he looked healthy last week. I think a couple of weeks ago, he still didn't look quite 100%. He only saw a few targets, but last week we saw him get, it was 11 targets off the top of my head. I'm going to pull his numbers up here, but I think I remember him getting 11 targets. And, Lofty and I were doing a sim show on Friday. We were walking through the main slate, talking about both games, and people in the chat were saying, hey, I don't want to play Sam Laporta because they felt that he didn't look healthy last week. But if him not looking healthy means that he gets targeted 11 times and he catches 9 of them for 65 yards, pretty good results. Like, I don't really care how healthy he isn't if these are the results we're going to get, because it seems to me that even a slightly compromised Sam Laporta is pretty damn good.
Yeah, he's just I mean, he had the second best, arguably a top 2 season all time for rookie tight ends from a fantasy perspective. The other guy that he beat out is Mike Ditka, well before fantasy was a thing. But Ditka had 1,200 yards in a 14-game season in an era where they didn't pass the ball. You can't dismiss that. But yeah, Laporta is he's so good at all aspects here. The other key thing, the funny thing today is every tight end has been a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro. That was on the 2-game slate, with the exception of Isaiah Quickly, but Andrews was. Just an amazing group of tight ends that were available for us today.
Yeah, we had all the teams that made it deep in the playoffs. It was all the teams with the best tight ends, and then of course we've seen some crazy good tight end performances. I mean, Travis Kelce is up to 11 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown for Travis Kelce in a game that, right now 17-10, so it's a 1-possession game. See if the Ravens could end up getting the ball back. But you guys are probably more well-versed in what's happening in the game than EMac and I, who are sitting here talking about the next game, whereas most of the people are watching the game, which also notable because not a ton of people watching the show right now, which will happen. There's better things to watch on TV. I get it. But if you guys are here, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I'm assuming there's some team free money head-to-heads there in the lobby. I'll go see if there's any. I'll throw a few more in just for the 100 or so, 200 people that are watching. But I'm rolling out McCaffrey. I do have Ferkser in that. I've got Laporta, St. Brown, Jamison Williams, and then Brandon Ayuk. And I played around with this a couple different ways. There's another build I kind of like that had Ray McLeod. Again, I'm considering McLeod and Ferkser kind of as potential, 1-point guys, 2-point guys. That's okay because I'm going to have to crush with everybody else. And I wanted McCaffrey as my lead guy. I wanted to have St. Brown on this for various reasons. We've mentioned Laporta, and all of a sudden I don't have much money left to spend. Mm-hmm. So that is I've had to make some tough decisions here. Myself, but these are the fun puzzles that we get to deal with, and I'm almost done building my lineups, Greg. This is a rarity here. There's no scramble.
Look at you go. One thing I also want to look at, which is pretty interesting, and then we can look more at some of the individual players, is some of the lineups that are expected to be duped the most frequently today, EMac, because as we know, in Showdown, you kind of want to try to avoid some of these heavily duped lineups. And there are some that are projected for very, very heavy dupes. So we'll do it for both DraftKings and FanDuel. But the lineups that are expected to draw the most dupes overall on DK, kind of interesting because even though George Kittle isn't projected for a lot of captain ownership, EMac, he is in the 2 lineups that are expected to be duped the most. And that's with people looking to save some money. And then also these 2 lineups use all of the salary. So those 2 things put together makes for some pretty heavy duped lineups. So the first one here, it is George Kittle in the multiplier spot with Ayuk, Purdy, McCaffrey, Moody, and Jamison Williams. So a 5-1 49ers onslaught. And then the next lineup here is Kittle in the captain spot with the 49ers defense, Ayuk, Purdy, McCaffrey, and then Josh Reynolds. So these are some lineups, guys, that you probably would want to stay away from. You don't want to play lineups that are expected to be duped really heavily. And then if we look over at FanDuel, there are a couple lineups here that are expected to be super heavily duped. We got Purdy in the MVP spot with Gibbs, Kittle, Ayuk, and Moody. And then another one, McCaffrey in the MVP spot with the 49ers defense, Bagley, Purdy, and Moody, a double kicker lineup. So those are the ones that are expected to be duped really heavily if that is something that interests you guys.
The old double kicker lineup. We do have a pretty aggressive projection here on Moody. I think last I saw we had like for 11.4 fantasy points. But, field goals are very, very fickle when it comes to trying to predict game to game when they're going to happen. So I have zero issue with that. But usually we are projecting kickers closer to 8 or 9 points. So that could be slightly influencing him to get into more lineups. But I still think that's also a function of very few cheap guys are expected to get many touches today. So,
yeah, hard to find value on the slate, which is the reason why I've got a shit ton of exposure to the kickers. But let's look at the quarterbacks, EMac. And, we kind of went about this slate a little bit backwards how we normally would, but a lot of that too is just because I was looking at my exposures and there's a couple things that stood out. Quarterbacks. Do you prefer getting to Brock Purdy or do you prefer getting to Jared Goff tonight?
So on the two gamer, those are, I believe, were my two most
for the showdown.
quarterbacks. No, I know, but for the showdown, it's kind of a coin flip. If I had to take one, I think I would actually go with Goff, and the main reason is the thought would be he's going to have to be throwing. San Francisco should be able to put points on the board, and he's got he's got Jahmyr Gibbs as a fine receiver out of the backfield, and then Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown we didn't really mention, but you got Josh Reynolds and Jameson Williams are their cheap guys. They're both I think like 3,800 and 4,200 or something like that on DK. So I actually would go with Goff. Neither one of these guys is really going to produce much on the ground. Sure, they could get a 15-yard scramble on a broken play out of desperation, or they could luck into a short yardage touchdown. But I think they're obviously much better options on both teams before that happens. But I do think there's a better chance that Goff has a multiple touchdown game than Purdy, but that's a huge function of having Christian McCaffrey, right? And I said something very similar in the last showdown game, and then each running back scored a touchdown in the first half for Detroit, but I'm going back to it again. So
yeah,
Goff it is. I can't believe this. Goff it is.
It's funny because so I have more exposure to Brock Purdy, EMac, as people could see on screen as I'm filtering through my lineups right now. But even though I have Purdy in more of my lineups, I'm underweight to Purdy and overweight to Jared Goff, just kind of a factor of what the ownership is. So I agree with you and kind of disagree with you at the same time, where it's like, hey, yeah, I do have more lineups with Purdy, but relative to ownership, if somebody who's just playing one lineup and trying to choose the quarterbacks, which, by the way, my single entry lineup, I actually did have the salary cap space to get to Brock Purdy in that lineup, but I ended up playing Jared Goff in it instead. So relative to ownership, if I'm only playing one of the quarterbacks, it is going to be Jared Goff for myself as well.
All right, I'm looking at mine. So yeah, so when you factor in the captain, it does end up being slightly Purdy, but otherwise it's like 3% when I add up captain and utility. Purdy just has a 3% advantage, so I'm going to make a few more Goff captains here just because.
And by the way, it does look like the Chiefs are about to win because I see that we had Patrick Mahomes throw a 32-yard pass to Eric's arch nemesis, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, which appears will seal the game.
Always fun. Always fun. Uh-oh. Why is this not working?
What now?
For some reason, my...
Oh, I see EMac. EMac's got his old man problem-solving face on.
Does Scuba do this? I don't know. If I'm locking in Goff, it doesn't have him come into my lineups now. That's kind of weird. Fortunately, we've got 22 minutes for me to figure this out. But that could be why he is on less of my lineups.
Yeah, Obi-Wan in the chat saying hashtag EMac, and we got stream elements thrown up, EMac 2024. Listen, if you want a presidential candidate who even knows what an optimizer is, EMac's your only choice. And EMac would also, by a considerable margin, be the youngest president in U.S. history. 205 years old, EMac would be the youngest one ever in the country's history. So I agree. EMac 2024, you want your president to be somebody who could somewhat navigate an optimizer and Sims tool.
Well, there's one way to always do it is to remove your rules, Greg, and then just click on the players you really want. Let's see if that works. If it doesn't, we're going with the Jesus take the wheel approach and just going with what's in there right now. So, okay, there we go. That at least got me a couple more. All righty, whatever. It's only money, Greg, and I appear to be made of it today the way I'm throwing it around.
By the way, there's only so many times you could make that excuse, EMac, where yesterday you miss out on Embiid sitting and go, it's only money. Today you miss NBA engineers, go, it's only money. And then today you're trying to get your NFL lineups and can't figure go, it's only money. At a certain point, I don't know if you could say that, like 6 slates per weekend.
Yeah, we want to limit this where we can. I do see Malcolm Revamp has given us a super chat. He says, was Moody he wants to know a little bit more about Moody as your captain.
Yeah. So as far as Moody as the captain, yes, here's the scenario. First of all, we have Moody projected for 11 fantasy points, which is not some sort of like insane projection. It's high for a kicker. It's the highest I've seen this year, but it's not some outlandishly high mark or anything like that. But here's the reason why I think you could justify getting to Jake Moody in the captain spot. First of all, nobody's playing him there. He's going to be incredibly low owned. The other thing also, there are a lot of stud skill position players in this game, EMac, but there are not cheap guys that we could really roster to comfortably get to them. There is a very live scenario where Christian McCaffrey is a big game. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a big game. George Kittle is a big game. One of the quarterbacks has a big game. And then every single value option puts up 0 fantasy points. Like, we've got people asking us about Anthony Ferkshire in our Discord channel. He's projected for 0.2 fantasy points. The reason is because people are just starved for value to save money with on the slate. So that's where, if you get a slate where maybe Jake Moody kicks 2 field goals, 2 extra points, and you've got him at that 11 fantasy point projection that we have him in for, well, then if all these studs go off, that could just be the most serviceable way to save value and find yourself salary savings on the slate. So I really do think that Jake Moody is live as a captain option, which I basically never say about kickers.
Yeah, and that also has me with Ferkser in 12% of my lineups, and he is in my cash game lineup. Just dropped a few more in there for team free money. Username EMac, that is in the DK lobby. So check that out. Reminder for those of you that have not signed up to Owner's Box, you still get that $500 deposit match on your initial deposit. You'll want to act fast because that is probably going to go down here at some point. And then, of course, Greg mentioned that we do have the Sims available as a bundle, and we are offering a $150 discount if you are utilizing the Stochastic avatar across your DFS sites of choice. You can get more information on that as well. Let's see here. I should just announce in our Discord that I'm playing Ferkser in cash. These won't stay out. They won't stay posted very long, Greg.
Yeah, if you guys want some free money, go play EMac in cash games. He's playing Anthony Ferkshire today. And then we did also get a question in our Discord channel from Father of 3. He said that he's getting to a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown in the captain spot. So I'm not sure what the question is, but I don't have an issue with that.
No, not at all. And especially if you're trying to maneuver, everybody's going to want to play McCaffrey, but you can go to Amon-Ra St. Brown, put him in the captain spot, and still on DK, and you can still do McCaffrey in the flex. And Ben Raza always talks about this well, and he has a good description of how you're fading McCaffrey, but you're not really fading him. And that's something that sometimes people lose sight of there. And usually we see that on very top-heavy slates with players like him, or the last few seasons previous to this, Lamar Jackson, et cetera, where someone is just going to just dominate both the salary cap and the likely touches. And we saw that with 21 touchdowns in the regular season. And then, of course, he scored last week as well. So I have zero issue with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's going to be somewhat popular today, but pulling back up my exposures here. And I mean, I've got him in right around half my lineups, which is slightly more than what the field has. Not like crazy more, but I am playing him a lot more in the flex spot than the captain spot. Amon-Ra St. Brown is in 7% of my captain lineups, but he is in 41% of my lineups in the flex spot there. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, clearly a great option. The only reason I don't have a ton of him in the captain spot is just because of salary constraints on the slate. It's hard to get to a ton of McCaffrey, Amon-Ra St. Brown in the multiplier spot on DraftKings without making some really big cost-saving choices elsewhere. Like EMac's playing Anthony Ferkshire. I don't want to tell you what EMac's entire lineup is for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't know what it is. Number two, he probably doesn't want me to give it out. But I'm going to pretty strongly guess that if EMac is playing Anthony Ferkshire, it means that he is Christian McCaffrey in the captain spot.
That would be some excellent detective work there, Greg.
I mean, there's just not another reason that somebody would go play Ferkshire. Like, you're not playing Ferkshire to play George Kittle in the captain spot.
No. Never would do that. But you don't have enough players selected. That's such a weird rule. All right. I see. Okay. How many Debo captains do you have? And how much do you think he's harboring a potential injury?
Well, I'm fairly certain he's injured. So here's the way I view Deebo Samuel. Earlier in the week, I thought he was a terrific low-owned play because the projections looked like nobody was getting to him at all. And here's the way I like to approach these scenarios with unknowns, EMac. If somebody is going to be very volatile, like very, very volatile, as Deebo Samuel is, we don't know how healthy his shoulder is or how healthy his shoulder isn't. If people are playing that player, I avoid him. Same thing with NBA. If we don't know what a guy's minutes are going to be like, it's an uncertain situation. If they're popular, I don't want to play them as much as the field. If they're if they're not popular, I want to play them more than the field. That's how I feel about this Deebo situation. His shoulder is messed up. He wasn't practicing earlier in the week. We don't know how healthy he is. We know he's going to play. But the way the field is playing it now, I mean, we've got the field playing Deebo Samuel in 30% of lineups on DraftKings. If he was still at his 10% ownership that he had on Friday when Lofty and I were building lineups, then yeah, I would like getting to Deebo Samuel as a low-owned play. But now that the field is actually getting there, it's not nearly as appealing to me because it's not something I really want to take on as far as a risk, where I would rather be underweight to him and then hope that we just don't see him play at 100%. Maybe he's just a decoy today. So I'm well underweight to field to him on DraftKings. On FanDuel, also don't get to a whole bunch of Deebo. The field's getting to him about a quarter of lineups. I have him less than 10%. So I prefer taking an underweight stance to Deebo because he is picking up ownership and there's so much volatility in his health. I don't know how anybody could look at Deebo Samuel and confidently say they know how good he's going to play today or how healthy he is or isn't. We don't know. All we know is that the field is expected to play him right now.
Good call outs. Did you end up with any defensive captains?
Any defense captains? I don't think so.
Yeah.
If I did, let's see.
That feels like a reach in this one.
49ers, I have one lineup out of 150 that has them in the MVP spot on FanDuel. If I did get to them on one site more than the other, it would be DraftKings. Just because of the way that salaries work there. But let's see. 49ers defense on DraftKings. Yeah, same deal. Hardly getting to them at all. I have, of my top lineups, I have one on FanDuel and one on DraftKings with the 49ers defense in the multiplier spot. So not really.
All right. I'm going to upload my lineups, Greg. This is it. Our last hurrah. We've got 12 minutes left before lock here. We've got excitement. I'm making nachos tonight for my mom and for my wife, so I'm looking forward to that. Super nachos, if you will.
What is the difference between nachos and super nachos, EMac?
Well, super nachos are very, very good because you do all sorts of fun things with them. Like tonight, it's going to be black beans and onions with salsa and sour cream. Sometimes my wife makes very, very good guacamole. Sometimes we go that route. Sometimes we'll put chicken on them or pork. So it's always fun with super nachos. No margaritas tonight, though.
Big things in the EMac household over there. Super nachos. It's my dad's birthday today. So as soon as I'm done with this, I've got dinner plans of my own. But yes, in the chat, accuracy also saying super nachos the only way to go. I'm still not exactly sure because what EMac explained to me sounded very much like regular nachos, but we call them super.
It's marketing, Greg. It's marketing. If you say, "Hey, sweetie, I'm going to make super nachos tonight. How does that sound?" She says, "Yes, that sounds great," which really means thank you. I don't have to cook.
Gotcha. So as opposed if you were to say that like, hey, I'm going to microwave nachos, that's not as appealing to.
But there's no microwaving nachos. You got to lay out the chips and then you put in black beans and chopped up onions and then you bake that. They're double baked. Mm-hmm. So you bake that for about 10 minutes and then you put on the cheese and the other stuff. Microwave, millennials. We didn't have a microwave till I was a junior in college, by the way, when I was growing up.
I had a friend in high school, and when I would go over his house, his mom wouldn't let us anywhere near the microwave because she was convinced it caused cancer. So like it was, they had the microwave in their house, but it was like his decoration in their kitchen. They might as well have had the yellow tape around it, "Do not enter," because it was like a hazard zone.
I remember we would go over to my friend's house. He had them and see how giant we could puff up the marshmallows or cheese and crackers to see how high you could get that going. Never put the pets in it though. We drew the line there. There we go. Hockey Freak Sean has it. Beef, peppers, pulled pork, onions, cheese. Yeah, that's the. Ooh, Pat Fitz says, "Hey Greg and EMac, I'm in first place for the 5,000 single entry on DraftKings. He has Jennings left. That's all. What are your chances of staying in first?"
0%. So it's
0.0.
Most of the players that are in the first game were not good for fantasy purposes, right? So the players that you want to have in your lineup, and like I don't know who else is in his lineup, or maybe he's playing some weird format. Did he say DraftKings actually?
Yeah, DK 5K single entry.
Yeah. So
I'm assuming that means
I don't want to be a wet blanket, but the answer is 0% because the only players you really feel good about having in your lineup right now are Zay Flowers, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco. Those are the only three guys you for sure want from that game. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he is cheap. He had 2 catches for 38 yards. It's a 2-game slate, so maybe he lands in a winning lineup. But if you full stack the Ravens-Chiefs game, unfortunately, you are dead. Apologies.
Yeah. That's and you had mentioned, what would you do to maneuver things around? And the answer is just nothing, because I was underweight on those 3 players that did well. Those are the ones we expected to probably do well, but they didn't. I mean, they had good games, but not insurmountable games, because we're looking at.
I don't know. I think Travis Kelce and Zay Flowers games are pretty insurmountable.
Do you think they are?
Yeah, I don't think there's a scenario where Travis Kelce had like 35 fantasy points on a 2-game slate. I don't see a scenario where he isn't in the winning lineup.
Yeah, how did he have that many? He had 20. Oh, because he got the bonus. I didn't think about the bonus.
Yeah, so Kelce finished
both got it.
Was it 32
11 for 1.
You know who else actually? Because I forgot about stupid defenses. The Chiefs defense scored 14 fantasy points. You want to have the Chiefs defense. They're pretty live as well.
All right. 8 minutes to go.
Did you figure out the situation with your lineups, by the way?
Nah, I'm letting it ride. We're just going with the Craig. It's too hard. It's too hard.
Just EMac just quitting. Very little fighting our old friend here.
It's been a long winter. It's been a long winter, Craig. So no, I'm okay with where I got. I must have had some complicated rule that was fighting with another rule in there, which is why I should go with the Sims. I should have gone with the Sims here.
Well, so something else too. Well, here's why I think people really should not use optimizers, particularly for showdown slates. You need a way to account for dupes in your lineups. If you're playing showdown
Correct.
and you're not considering dupes for lineups at all, you're making a pretty big mistake.
Yeah. And so I play a ton of those booster contests, and I'm playing a ton of ticket contests, Greg. So I'm kind of going for the Ricky Bobby all or nothing. And if you dupe on the ticket contest, you get cash. If you finish tied at the top, they just give you DK bucks or whatever. They don't give you half a ticket. So I'm okay with that. But you're absolutely right. I don't play in the 100,000 person contests either. I usually keep it, 2,000 people or less. Because if I get a 1% lineup, I'd like it to actually maybe get 3 or 4x payout. Whereas if you're in the gigantic contest, you're maybe going to double up. So got to know these payout structures.
In Discord, this was also from Father of 3. He says that he is not getting to. So he's not getting to any Christian McCaffrey in his single entry lineup, which. If you're just playing single entry, I don't have an issue with building one lineup that doesn't have Christian McCaffrey. You don't have to play McCaffrey today. I know this is a DraftKings specific question. I really like being underweight to the field on McCaffrey on FanDuel. On DraftKings, yeah, I don't have an issue playing lineups that don't have Christian McCaffrey, but I am a little confused by him saying that he's not getting to any lineups in single entry that have Christian McCaffrey, because that kind of implies it's only one lineup. Right? If you're playing a handful of different lineups and none of them have Christian McCaffrey, yeah, I think that's an issue. If you're just playing one lineup that doesn't have McCaffrey, that's not problematic in my opinion.
No, and that makes sense. I'm underweight on him.
Mhm.
So I don't have any issue going 0. I have 34% in the flex and 15% in the captain. So I'm about around the field in the captain, but I'm about 20% below in the flex. But I am above, a little bit above on Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then who am I really above on? It's Goff. I'm 12% above the field on Goff. So there's my stand.
Makes sense to me. I don't have any kinds of issues with that.
And
also,
Laporta and Kittle. Those are the other two. So I'm kind of going that route. We'll see.
anything else surprising you about your lineups here? Only a couple minutes left to go. If you guys haven't done yet, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Anything that you are or aren't getting to in your final set of lineups here, EMac, that is surprising you?
No, the main person I hardly got any of was Jahmyr Gibbs. I had to force it. I ended up with 19%. That's right around where the field is. But prior to that, I was only at 8%. And then where is he in the? And then I only have him on. I tried to get above when I realized how lineups were being constructed. I tried to double up on him in the multiplier slot. The path to getting there will be no passing touchdowns to him or rushing touchdowns to him and not to Amon-Ra or Laporta. So I thought, well, let's build some contingency lineups for that route. We shall see, Greg. We shall see.
You playing on FanDuel and DraftKings or just one or the other? You playing on Owner's Box? I think the Owner's Box contest has filled already, but guys, don't forget that if you sign up at Owner's Box and use the link that we have below, you do get a deposit bonus of up to $500. I'm going to double check that to see that Owner's Box contest did fill, and yeah, they just got a small one up right now. But do you play on multiple sites tonight, EMac, or do you keep yourself to one?
Just one. For Showdown and being on air and with all the other sports going on, it's a little tricky. I want to see where I ended up. I think I only had 17% Kelsey on the main slate, so I could be in trouble here. I had 17%. The field we were projecting for double that at 34. I didn't see where he came in, but I've got some work cut out for me here. Just need one or two lineups to break free, as Josh Engelman likes to say.
Yeah, so in the Millie contest, Kelsey is 24.5% on. The field did not roster the Chiefs or Patrick Mahomes very much. So that was something I noticed when I was building my lineups. His projected ownership kept coming down. So I ended up going very heavy on the Chiefs. My most rostered quarterback is Mahomes, most rostered running back, Pacheco, most rostered tight end, Travis Kelce, most rostered wide receivers, Rashee Rice for me on the slate, and most rostered defense ended up being the Kansas City Chiefs for me. So mixed bag there, but the Travis Kelce will help me, but some of the other players, not as much. Pacheco, fine. Mahomes, less so. Chiefs defense, good. Kelce, good. Rashee Rice, unfortunately, the touchdown called back. It's gonna be a big issue for me in hindsight there.
Indeed. Yeah, it was interesting to see the tight ends kind of just coexist for Baltimore. That was sort of what we expected, but so I read a few people getting really deep into the weeds on how to play that, and sort of I'm thinking in the back of my head, but the other three guys either made the Pro Bowl or were all pros this year on the other teams. So why are we parsing that one out where the pricing was? So sometimes I believe the kids call that going to Galaxy Brain. Or is
yeah,
it
we
Gal
had
Brain?
2 catches for 15 yards for Mark Andrews, 2 for 16 for Isaiah Likely. So they are both very dead. So EMac, that brings us to the end of the show, and I've got dinner plans to get to for my dad's birthday. So why don't you sign us off here and tell people your catchphrase, because you forgot it yesterday and people got very upset.
I forgot it. We can't have that again. So you guys can follow Greg on Twitter at @GEhrenbergDFS. I'm at EMac DFS. It is Stochastic _COM. With that, gamers, good luck.